All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you again for joining this Monday. I do pray that you had a great weekend and the previous week, even though we had many events to take place last week. You still found yourself to be safe and blessed during that time. Um, I initially, well, I know many of you probably were going to log in, and I know some of you still are going to log in here with me. Um, Probably knew that I was going to come on here and rant and rave about the events of last week. And honestly, that was going to be my intention. That's exactly what I was going to do because so much happened. So much is still happening. So much is still going on. Um, anything from, I don't know, the lack of security, the lack of show of force that was nowhere uh, near what you saw for Black Lives Matter or for any other type of march or any other type of um, protest was not there. Uh, seeing uh, a flag being flown of a defeated uh, army from you know a previous civil war being flown in our capital, along with a flag that seems to extol their leader as almost to the point where, for some, I believe it's almost like worship because no matter what he does, he can do no wrong, and it seemed that they would back him no matter what. I mean, even just the disrespect of going into the Capitol in the way that they did it, um, it was just really disturbing, and it really hurt my heart. It really did bother me um, to see those actions take place. Not even at first about the lack of security or the lack of show of force, but just the wanton disrespect of our capital and um, our declaration and to veil that with some other things as if they are patriotic. um, it, it just it just really got to me. Is all I can really say. um, for every time I would see the pictures of the Confederate flag in the Capitol. I mean, that's serious to me. That's like an invading army coming into your country and saying, "Now this is mine and this is ours," and that really bothered me. Uh, and again, the lack of force. It's no way, and I know it's been said over and over again, but had that been um, any other racial group, I don't think any of that would have happened. There's no way they would have been able to climb walls. There's no way they would have be able to break down doors and windows on our nation's capital. It's just no way that would have happened. I just don't believe that could ever happen. And I think in a sense it's because they don't see themselves or people of their own color as a threat, and I guess that's just another proof of what many are calling white privilege, because it was a privilege that they didn't have to face the same things that we of color often have to face. Um, so you know, it's a lot going on. It's a lot to take in. I know there's been, I didn't watch much news today, so I don't know if there's anything new going on. But I know there's been talk about, trying to get him impeached and things like that. And to be honest, and I was sharing this with somebody else, um, I worry that if we try to impeach him and we don't get the votes, that's just going to embolden his followers even more because it makes him look more like Teflon Don. It makes him look more like he's untouchable, unreachable. Um, and when he's going to speak in the future, it's just going to give him more power with certain people. Now, on the other hand, I think that these events may have gotten some of his supporters off of his train, if you will. Um, but only time will tell. So those are some of the things I was going to talk about. Um, But then an opportunity came our way where I am able to bring you another guest um, that I think is really beneficial, that I think will really help us a lot in how we're seeing this world that we're living in. Um, Dr. Mike Dorsey, he was just with me last week, uh, introduced me to this gentleman by way of, messenger and everything like that. We just really started talking just recently, past within the past half hour, really. But Mike gave me this idea that maybe we can talk about a few things with him and get a perspective that um, he has that he can share with us. And we're going to see. You know, we're going to talk a lot about what does it mean to be, or why do you think as evangelicals, specifically even white evangelicals, why do they support Trump? Um, I said it before in another broadcast, right around that George Floyd incident, it's much more than an incident, but right around George Floyd and thereafter, the question was, where are they? Why aren't they speaking up? Why aren't they saying more? And they were eerily quiet. And they weren't, giving a lot of leadership. They weren't coming to the mic. They weren't saying anything that let us know that they were aware of this racial divide and that they were ready to come out and try to do something as far as diversity and equality, that they was going to help make a change. And even now, I was thinking about it today, with last week's shenanigans, insurgents, haven't heard anything from those major preachers, those major evangelicals, who vehemently supports Donald Trump, and saw prayer services for him. That they saw this thing of victory and all that. It's like, again, where are they? Why are they being so quiet? So, as I was saying before I went that way, Mike introduced me to this gentleman, and thought it would be a good conversation for us to have that would help us all. So he is the pastor. Okay, and I want to share a screen real quick. Boom, boom, boom. He is the pastor of Central Christian Church. Okay. In Springfield, Ohio. He's been a pastor now. I think it's been almost 6 or 7 years now. I was kind of looking at the website a little bit earlier. I think that we will get a lot of insight from him. So if you would please welcome Pastor Carl Ruby. Welcome, Pastor.
Hey, Mark.
Thank you again for joining today.
Michael Dorsey's your friend of mine.
Yes. And I'm glad he was able to convince you to come on. Mike is a great guy. Dr. Mike, I love calling on Dr. Mike. He put in his time. He put in his work. He earned that doctor. So I love to call on Dr. Mike. A really true, great friend to myself, to my family. Can't say enough good things about him. Glad the Lord put him in my life as a blessing and a challenge, to be honest, at times. So I had noticed also that he said that you're a Michigan fan.
Yeah. This is first year recently that we haven't been beat by Ohio State.
Yeah. I know you guys are really happy about that. Now, I did ask you, do you support any of those NFL teams over there in Ohio?
I'm not a big NFL guy, so
good. Then there won't be any conflict here then today.
Are you the Ravens guy?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So we're excited about playoff times right now. I'm sorry?
They came from behind yesterday, right?
Yeah, they certainly did. And, the announcers were saying, we're not built to come from behind. But guess what? Once again, we showed them to be wrong. All right. Hey, Tony. Hey, Tammy. Hey, listen, y'all. I need y'all to ask questions. I need y'all to, be involved with this conversation because, again, it's a conversation between the pastor and I, but also with you guys. So if you have questions, ask questions. I will let you know that we do have some technology issues, but prayerfully we won't have that while we're broadcasting. But if so, I'll put the number up for you to call in if you want to call in. All right. Hey, Tasha, glad you're here as well. I expect more people will join as we're going on. So, Pastor, you kind of heard my opening and the things I was saying, and certainly it's not just about Trump, although once again, he's the headliner of a lot of different things. But really, my question to you is, why is it that so many evangelicals, and I'm not going to necessarily say white or black, okay, although I was kind of looking for some type of leadership in that area, but why is it that so many seem to fall behind, in your opinion, behind Donald Trump? Why do you think they feel the need to support?
Well, I want to start with a couple of caveats, and one is.
Uh-oh. So, Pastor, it looks like that she froze on me.
To speak to issues like this.
Okay.
Man, that's a great question, Mark, and I have pondered it a lot. It's difficult. I have grown up in fundamentalism and evangelicalism, and grew up in a Republican family and voted Republican most of my life. I have not been able to do that the last several cycles. So it's a struggle for me to understand sometimes how people can observe the behavior that I observe and remain supportive. And I think there are I think there are a number of factors. I think one thing that drives a lot of evangelicalism right now is fear, and fear that control of the culture is slipping away from them. And I think many evangelicals saw Trump as someone who would protect them and restore their power. And there's a part of particularly white evangelicalism that has felt like they are victims of a culture that's against them. And I encourage my congregation not to buy into that. I don't think we have any right to play the victim card. I mean, Christians all over the world, and certainly African American Christians in our country, have been victimized in ways that we can't even identify with. So I personally don't feel that. But I think that fear of losing cultural control is behind a lot of it. And to be honest, I think that there are latent issues of racism and white supremacy that play into it, unfortunately. I've been reading a book, I don't know if you've read the book, called White Too Long, which is a book exploring how the evangelical church in the 1800s developed a defense for white supremacy. And it's a matter of the church not just being ignorant or naive to white supremacy, but actually providing a theology that supported it. And that's a part of our past that I think we have to reckon with. And I think that the president tapped into that in his campaign.
Yeah, and it's funny. That's usually how most campaigns are run. They find a thing that the people are afraid of, whether it's real or not, and they make that the focus to say, this is what they're going to do to you. This is what they're going to take away from you. And I think he played on that a lot. But what I continue to have a problem with, and he's only going to be around for one term, but after he actually got into the house, he still showed his true self, that he really wasn't for those who he thought, or those that thought he would be for. He didn't really make any difference in their lives. He didn't really keep to his promises. When you really think about anything that he may have promised, he just didn't hold up to that. And that's why I still find it bewildering when I look at the pictures on the screen and things like that. Why is it that they still so fervently follow? Why do they still declare him to be such a great president? And is it truly just because of fear of losing what they have? And really, what is it have they gained with him?
I will be as transparent as I can with you. And I was, I voted for Biden in the last election, and have been a critic of Trump throughout most of his term. So I'm not coming as someone who has been a supporter, and I can explain my reasons for that. But as I talk to people who have supported him, what I have heard from some of my white evangelical friends who love Jesus very much and see this very differently than I do, is they would disagree. They would say that he did follow through on some of his promises in terms of appointing more pro-life types of judges, appointing conservative judges, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, doing some things I think that probably protected religious liberty. So I think some of them would say that he did come through on some of his promises. I don't see those as the main issues. And to me, and the other thing that I heard from a lot of my good friends is they would say, I'm not approving of his character. I think and they use all kinds of terms to describe their dislike for him. And they'll say, I dislike him personally, but he promotes policies that I value, and I think he promoted policies that are better than the other person would have. So that's the rationale that I hear from people who are supportive of him.
Okay.
My response to them has been that, from my opinion, his character is so flawed that whatever he may accomplish in the area of policies that may or may not be good ones, the dangers of his character unraveling outweigh any potential policy gains. So my opposition to him primarily has been in the area of character, and also racial justice. I'm a very big advocate for immigration reform, and spent a number of years advocating for comprehensive immigration reform. Went to Washington and took people to meet with congressmen and senators and to ask them to support immigration reform. So that is a huge issue for me. And it's an issue that to me, it is a justice issue. Matter of fact, what motivated me to get involved on immigration reform was taking a tour of students at the university I used to work with, tracing the life of Martin Luther King. And we ended up at the Lorraine Hotel, and I remember standing there, actually not Lorraine Hotel. The event that I'm thinking about took place at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. But we went to the 16th Street Baptist Church, and we talked to people who were in the church the day that it was bombed, and four beautiful little girls lost their lives. And then I went across the street to the Civil Rights Institute, and I read King's letter from a Birmingham jail. And I hate to admit this, I'm really ashamed to admit it, but I think it's the first time I ever really read the letter.
Wow.
And I grew up in white churches. I went to a white Christian school. I went to a Christian university that was predominantly white. I went to Wheaton College for my master's degree, which was predominantly white. And in my area of study, no one ever felt that that was something that I needed to read.
Right.
I found it hard to. I'll let Wheaton off the hook because I really wasn't taking classes in that area. I was taking psych classes, but as I went through my experience at Cedarville's where I attended, I was never encouraged to read it and just didn't recognize what it was. I thought it was going to be a kind of leftist political manifesto,
Right.
and when I read it, I was shocked to find out he is crying out to people like me to stand with him, and
Yep.
those who didn't stand with him were on the wrong side of history. And I thought, man, how ashamed they must be. Looking back, how would you explain to your children that I didn't take a stand on this issue, when from this point in history it seems so obvious that white moderates and white evangelicals should have been marching hand in hand
Right.
with King.
Yeah.
And I left that convicted to find a place where I could take a stand, and immigration reform is kind of where I landed. So one of my main reasons for not supporting President Trump was I objected to all of the things that he was saying about the way that he was characterizing immigrants. And then I also, my personal opinion is that he has fanned the flames of racism. And some of my white colleagues and friends would disagree with that. But he seems to be, it seems to me, my opinion, is that he was a master at saying things that would inflame people who were absolute white supremacists. But he was able, he would frame it in a way that he could back away from it and say, oh, that's not what I was really saying.
Right.
And he did it over and over and over again. And I think that people who are inclined to be white supremacists heard what they wanted to hear. And I think much of what motivated the attack on the Capitol, I think there's a high percentage of white supremacists in that crowd.
Yep.
And I'm not accusing all Trump supporters of being that. I know many who are not. But I think that the crowd that I was seeing, tearing the Capitol apart, that's what the crowd looked like to me. I mean, I saw the Confederate flag that you saw and everyone else saw.
Yeah, and that's something I did want to mention. I don't believe that everybody that went there on that day went there to do what happened. They did not go there to attack. I believe that they really did believe that they wanted their voice to be heard. They still wanted it to be known that they did not necessarily believe that he lost the election, even though, time and time again, it's been proven that's been a lie. But I think there's always a pocket of people who just want to be destructive. And I think that was that group that we saw. And I think there's some that just get caught up in that mob mentality and then they go for it as well. But by no means, because I forget what I was watching, but there was two ladies being interviewed, and they was like, well, how do you feel about, all the violence that's going on? How do you feel about all these things that are taking place? And it's like, that's not us. That's not me. None of that is being done by my group. So it's like you still see that there's this, even within that, there's a separation for those who truly do believe they're being patriotic by speaking their voice. But then there are others who I believe, like you were saying, they have this fear because they, I've often heard 25, 30 years down the road that it's going to be more immigrants, that the white is going to become the minority 35 years from now, and that's what's really scaring them. So I do believe that to be true as well.
Absolutely.
You mentioned character, and I think for me, character was really important to me as well. In the beginning, to me, for him even to get to the point of being nominated to be president was mind-boggling, because I'm not real old, but I'm old enough to know that there's just certain things you expect of a president. There's certain, it's like when I was taught, you look up to the presidency as they are somewhat the moral compass. They are somewhat the American to aspire to become. You know what I mean? Now, that's not to say I didn't know. Now, when I was younger, I didn't. But of course, I know there's been plenty of presidents that had their own issues, with infidelity and all kinds of things. But when I saw the character of this particular man, and he was just like unapologetic about it, again, growing up, there's no way there would have been a president that had been divorced 3 times or 2 times, however times it's been. There's no way you would have had somebody as a president that had got caught or used certain language. That just wouldn't have happened. So for me, it showed the character of who he is and who he was. But not only that, it also gave me a little more insight of who we have become as a nation. It says something about who we are in our own character as a nation, what we have now decided to be allowable. And that bothers me as well. And again, it goes back to that question, what's more important, the policies that are going to hold for the day, or the character of the man, which is the reflection of the character of the nation? What should we really be looking for? And by no means am I thinking that Biden is like the opposite. I don't know him personally, but at least on the surface, what has been portrayed by him, he seems to be more on the lines of the character I would want to see in my president, in my leader. And I've said it before. I believe a leader his words should inspire. It should move people to do greater things. Whereas I always felt like President Trump, and I still got to call him president because he's still president. President Trump, he always did and said things that was divisive, things that would continue to divide us. And like you said, he would say one thing, but he would take it to a point, but would be able to say, well, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean to say it that way. Or, I was joking, whatever. Okay. I just wonder, where are we at as a nation? Go ahead.
I mean, one thing I would say for Trump is he's remarkably consistent.
Yeah.
And he is, there shouldn't be any surprises. He's exactly the person he was before he was elected. I think, a lot of people were saying, well, he's going to rise to the dignity of the job and he's going to become presidential.
That was the hope.
I didn't see that happen. And I think, I think it exposed a vein of hypocrisy in evangelicalism, that we talk so much about character and sexual purity and things like that, but all of that went out the window immediately when President Trump came along. And again, I think it goes back, we talked about at the beginning. There's this fear that Christianity is under attack in America, and we lost all the culture wars, and our faith is going to collapse. I just don't see it that way. I mean, I think that the gates of hell cannot prevail against the church. The church is going to move forward. The church doesn't. And another issue, I think people. The other thing that I sensed was a sense that the church needs the protection of the state. We need a president who will protect us. And church, the church has thrived in cultures where it's under attack, and we still are. I mean, for us to claim persecution, to me, is just an insult to people who have truly been persecuted and people who are truly being persecuted right now.
Yeah.
And I would say even to the persecution our African American brothers and sisters in Christ have faced for a long time.
And what you're saying is true, because that is another area of fear. But it seems to me that if the church does not stand up for what's right and what's wrong, and again, that goes back to my whole thought of the evangelical leaders, the well-known voices that are out there, when they don't speak. It seems to me that when they don't speak, that's what makes it even more dangerous for us to be seen as hypocritical. It makes it more, and then that gives people the reason to say, well, I'm not going to be like that. I don't want to become a Christian, because they say one thing, they preach one thing, but then they condone this. You know what I mean? And I think that is more of a threat than anything else.
Yeah, I think untold damage has been done to the reputation of the church by, you mentioned something earlier and talked about the loyalty that you've seen borders on worship. And I think you're exactly right. And not that everyone who voted for him is like that. But when you look at his most ardent supporters, and you look at the ones who go to all the rallies, those to me look like worship services. And even some things that he said, he made claims that he never needed to be forgiven. And really, I think at different points said some things were really blasphemous. And his ardent supporters just looked the other way. And that I think we harmed our reputation. And I think we regain our reputation by being invested in issues of justice. I think when people see evangelicals or whatever Christian group it is, when people see us loving our neighbors and caring for the poor and providing real solutions to real problems, they will be drawn to the gospel. The gospel of Jesus Christ is a gospel that involves sight for the blind and setting captives free. And those are attractive things. And I think that when the church embodies those things, people will be drawn to Jesus Christ. And we need to get back. I think we need to back out of some of our political involvement. And that's a warning to us with Biden. Biden isn't the Messiah. He isn't our savior.
Right.
And we need to be, we shouldn't make him that. But I think a lot of damage has been done and needs to be repaired. And I think we repair it by being people of integrity and being people who care about issues of justice.
And that leads me into what my next question was really going to be about, is how do we, the church, how do we aid the healing of the nation? How do we go about, because it's obvious we do have influence on the Hill. It's obvious that there's money being spent on the Hill by evangelicals. But what do we do? What do you see or foresee needs to take place that's going to start to heal? Because when you think about more than 70 million people voting for him, and still so many still having hurt feelings about him losing, and us looking to be so divided, not only within ourselves, but the entire world, what is it that you believe that the church needs to do? And you mentioned it, showing Christ's love, doing things like that, fighting for injustice, things like that. But what are some concrete things that we can really do that can help propel a conversation with those that we know support Trump, And again, I'm not saying white, I'm not saying black, because I know plenty of African Americans who voted for him. I know plenty of Latinx people who voted for him, but again, it was all based on what they were afraid could happen. You know what I mean? It's more so about the fear factor. And we know that God doesn't want to give us a spirit of fear. So what is it that we can do, in your opinion, that can help heal the nation?
Well, I think it starts, we need to be careful not to demonize all Trump supporters.
Right.
And we need to seek to understand what they are concerned. And I think if we dig into some of these issues and stay in conversation with one another, I think we'll find that there are a lot of things that we agree upon. So staying in conversation, we're looking at a program at Central. There's a curriculum called the Colossian Forum that's out of Grand Rapids. And it's a curriculum that's based on the premise that wherever there are strong disagreements, there are opportunities for spiritual development. So we're going to go through that as a church. I actually have a friend who is a enthusiastic Trump supporter. who's going to co-lead the class with me. So I voted for Biden. He voted for Trump. We're going to lead this group together and really work very hard at listening to one another. All of us, myself included, are so reactive right now. For example, last night I was looking on Facebook and I saw something that one of our members posted, and it bothered me. And I wrestled with what my responsibility as a pastor was, and I reached out to him privately and kind of confronted him on it. And then today I regretted doing that. I thought, these need to be face-to-face conversations. Sending someone a text is not the right. I reached out to him. He was very, very gracious. We had a good talk. But we've got to stay in conversation with people who see this differently, and realize, we need to have our eyes open to our own flaws. The whole idea of trying to get a board out of someone else's eye, or a speck out of someone else's eye. We have a board in our own eye. We need to be sensitive to areas in our own lives where we engage in hypocrisy. It's going to require a great deal of humility and grace and patience. But I think of the Christian virtues that are outlined in the New Testament. The Christian virtues are patience, compassion, kindness, being long-suffering, being gentle, loving kindness, all of those things. I think we need to get our attention off all of these political issues and onto these biblical virtues, because in a lot of ways, our responsibilities remain, as Christians, our responsibilities remain pretty much the same, no matter who is in office.
Absolutely.
And we need to be following the King and doing the work of the kingdom. And we're called to love our neighbors. We're called to take care of the poor. We're called to address issues of justice. We're called to make disciples. All of those things are the same, no matter who is in president. And I think, for me, I spent a lot of the last 4 years being really, really upset. And I'm kind of a news junkie. I like watching the news. I like following politics. And I was just mad a lot.
Yeah.
And there were several times I said to my wife, if I could just keep my focus on the fact that my primary identity is a member of the kingdom of heaven.
That's it. And
Jesus is my king. The kingdom of heaven is where my allegiance is. It's going to win. If the story isn't good, it isn't finished yet. Everything that is broken is going to be fixed. If I could keep that in mind, I wouldn't have experienced all the angst that I experienced when I watched news too much.
Yeah.
I went through a time where I was quarantining because I'd been near someone who'd been exposed to COVID-19. So I lived in my church office for a couple of weeks. And when I lived in my church office, I wasn't able to watch the news. And I was a much happier, more content person. And we can't pour cable news into our hearts 24 hours a day and be healthy people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are people who watch cable news. We as pastors, we have a chance for maybe 30 minutes or an hour to impact them on Sunday mornings, and they're getting 6 hours of cable news every day, indoctrinating them with a certain perspective. Yeah. It's hard to compete with that, and I'll be careful about naming networks. But I think there are networks that I think are intentionally firing people up and have had a great impact on the attitudes and beliefs of the church in ways that have not been healthy.
Absolutely. Well, but before we go into the next little thing, again, we're on with Pastor Carl Ruby of Central Christian. So appreciate him being here. Again, you all type in some questions. If you have a question for Pastor Ruby, type it in. I'll see it. Let me put the number up because it looks like our connectivity is working okay for the moment anyway. You can call 410-513-9499 if you want to speak directly to Pastor Ruby. I'm sure he'll answer any questions or give you some insight. You know, it's interesting that you said what you just said, because I was just listening to another pastor here in Baltimore, Pastor Nunez, of a bilingual church here in Baltimore. And he was saying the same exact thing, that we need to make sure we always remember that we are citizens of the kingdom first before we are anything else. And that we need to make sure we are pledging our allegiance. He didn't say this. This is what I'm saying. We need to pledge our allegiance to the kingdom, to the king of the kingdom, before we pledge our allegiance to anything else. Okay. Now, does that mean that we still can't be good Americans? That we still can't be patriotic? That we can't say pledge allegiance to the flag? Sure. But our first cause should always be the cause of Christ. It should always be the cause to build the kingdom, to edify the saints, to lift others up, to introduce those who are in darkness to his marvelous light. That should be our first concern always. So I'm starting to hear that more and more, and I'm hoping that others, those of us that are already in the kingdom, will catch hold of that. But I'm also hoping that those who we end up talking to, that God puts in our path to have a conversation with, that they will see that is who we are, that we are the children of God.
Mark, there's another issue that I think plays into that, and it gets back to the fear motivation that I think drives a lot of evangelicals, and that is that there is a belief that America was this great Christian nation, and we've lost that. And I think we've always been a nation composed of broken people, and we can't claim to be a great Christian nation with great Christian forefathers and then justify atrocities that were committed against Native Americans, the national sin of slavery. You can't have both. So I think there's a myth that we were once something and now that's being taken away from us. We've always been a nation that has some wonderful freedoms, and some amazing things to be thankful for, but it's always been a nation composed of flawed people who did horrible, sinful things. And to me, that's just another incentive to build my identity, not based on being an American or a Republican or whatever, but basing my identity on a member of the kingdom of heaven.
I agree. With all that's been done, over the past 4 years, and it's been more than just 4 years, but with all the injustice, with all the things that have taken place, it just seems that over the past 4 years, the cover's been pulled back a little bit more on some of these injustices, and more people are becoming more aware. Because the longer things go on, and the more I have conversations with others, I've come to realize that there are some who are just truly blind. Like you said, when you're speaking about, reading Dr. King's letter from prison, that was something that you was never introduced to because it was never presented to you as being important. You know what I mean? And understanding that was just as valid a part of our history, and that leader had a voice that affected many, but it just wasn't pushed out there that way. So I understand now that there are truly some who don't understand, who will never understand the struggle that others have had. Just like, we talk a lot about, racial injustice and how hard it is for Black men and Black women, how hard it is. But there are also poor white people that are struggling, and they're struggling in different ways. And we would never understand their struggle. So we all have these different struggles, okay? And yet either we take one side or the other. Either we say, but my struggle is more important than yours, or my struggle is harder than yours, okay? And it's like, we can't think like that, especially if you are considering yourself to be a Christian. If you say you're a Christian, then any struggle is significant. And we still need to make sure that we're saying the answer to your struggle is Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, white supremacy has found fertile ground among the poor segment of the white population who are struggling. That often is an area where white supremacy gains a foothold. And again, I think there's the idea that if we let our African American brothers and sisters have access to the privileges that we have, somehow we're going to lose out, or it's going to be taken away from us. But you're right. People of all races struggle, but certainly the track record in this country for depriving African American brothers and sisters is something we have to reckon with.
Absolutely. And like you said, we are a country that is flawed. We are a country that is flawed. It's always been flawed. And I think, again, I've said it on previous episodes, what's so great about this country is I still see that we have the potential to get a lot more things right, and that we're still growing. We're still babes when it comes to the rest of the world, when it comes to a nation. We're still babes in regard. And we're still infants in a lot of regards. Thank you for calling Keep It Real. I have you online.
Hey, Marcus, Michelle.
Hey, Michelle.
Hi, Pastor Ruby. How are you?
Can you hear Pastor
I'm doing
Ruby?
well.
Okay, good. Well, I chimed in late because I got off work late, but it was enough to hear when Pastor Ruby said, and just paraphrasing that, we are under the illusion that this country was built on Judeo-Christian principles, and when and I'm a believer. Just for anybody listening that don't know, I am a believer. But the evangelicals that are prominent, that you see, a lot of them, not everybody, but are prominent that you see and hear, they are. I mean, it's so disturbing, and then it's to the point where it just makes you angry, because I feel like, thankfully, by the grace of God, that whether it's the sermon or that, we've had teaching, that I can see that just because somebody is a preacher doesn't mean that everything that comes out of their mouth is from the Lord or correct, that they don't have their biases, and all. But there are a lot of people that, because it came from a preacher, that they will take that as from the Lord, not recognizing that this is a man or a woman first. Okay. And I get so where I explain to some people, you know what? They are no more his child than me. Okay. I am just as much God's child as they don't have any more access or any more insight as me. But people really think that, some people that are leaders in the church, like you have to follow what they say. And to me, that's just like that cult mentality, that Jim Jones mentality, that if you can follow them down a path. And one of the other things that really, really is bothering me, to the point where I would even say it angers me, is that a lot of these they're Republicans, okay? And instead of saying, it's my Republican beliefs, they will try to, what's the word, flip it or switch it, like to say that, this is what God said, to say, and that burns me up. That it really does, and it just to the point where with some of them, I just can't even stand it's like I just can't even hear anything from them anymore. But one of the things, I guess that gives me some encouragement is what I truly believe about God and what I've seen about God is that if you have a level of influence and you misrepresent him, he will let you get exposed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but unfortunately, some people, even with the exposure, like they just let it go or just, choose to not see it, or, despite the evidence. But with that's something that I think is a real challenge for the church, because not only, to me, you're not going to win anybody like that, and being so judgmental, and just you're not gonna. First of all, you're not gonna win anybody like that. And to me, it turns them away. Who want to be attracted and be a part of people who are so judgmental and just so, you know, um, when you brought up and y'all were talking about, how this country was founded. As we get more educated and we see more, you see that a lot of our white Christian friends, the things that they did to natives and all, you see a lot of things that was done that just seems to get glossed over, and to me, it's like, okay, you need to have the perspective that these are people first.
Right.
They're
Right.
people first, and everything, just like with me, everything, I don't do it all right all the time, and am I a believer? Yes, I am. Okay, yeah, they might be a believer, but everything they did wasn't right. And you have to be able to acknowledge that and to see that. And it's just this whole thing, I think it's, as much as we may want it or to see it, and also what happens, just like for me,
Well,
when I hear them come on the TV, I don't hear them, so it's like I can't even stand to listen to them. That's why we just get so entrenched in, people that talk like we do. You can't get another perspective. You can't, hear from anybody else or something. It's just so polarized. And as much as we might like it, I don't see it changing.
all right.
Personally, I
Well,
don't see it changing.
well, that's something that we
Michelle,
just have to continue to worry about. Go ahead, Pastor.
no, I'll just say to Michelle, just that one of the hardest things for me this past year are watching people who were national Christian leaders give a pass to immoral behavior and to not to not hold the president accountable when he said things that, from my opinion, were racial dog whistles. And I think your concerns are justified, and I share your frustration with that.
Yeah, and I was going to say you're right in our respects, Michelle, that we cannot afford to just listen to the voices that tickle our ears. We have to be
Yeah,
open to hear other what other people are saying and what they are feeling. Because I feel like that's why you mentioned earlier. Why would anybody want to follow somebody like that? Well, it's obvious that they're following for a reason. I think that's the question I've had all along. What is it that they're seeing that's attractive? Well, Pastor Ruby said it earlier. Donald Trump, in the sense of his genius, he knows how to tap into what people are starving for. He knows what to say because he knows and understands what they're feeling. I'm going to let you go, Michelle, in case somebody else wants to call in, but I do appreciate you calling in. But when you think about, and again, it's when you really think about others, during that first election, the polls said one thing. Now that either meant that they weren't polling the right people or people were just lying. Okay. But it became obvious that he was speaking to a segment of this country, and he connected with a segment of this country, okay, that felt like they were not being heard. And finally, they had somebody that understood where they were at. And that's how that happened. I think now, again, I think narrowly I wouldn't say we beat, but it flips a little bit now because people recognize there's a change, and that this country that was going to be so great, what was being promoted as being great again is not the direction that most of us, the majority of us, if you will, does not want our country to continue to go on. And it kind of goes back to the whole Obama effect to me, because I believe that with a lot of people, when we elected a black president, a lot of people are like, we are no longer a racist country. Racism is done. And people really felt that way. And that's why we got so blind, because we're listening to what we want to hear, what we want to believe, as opposed to hearing and listening to what is really being said to the other piece, to those other persons. And again, the only way you can hear them is by having a conversation with them. And I always say, just because you have a conversation, just because you try to seek understanding, does not mean that you have to agree. But you should at least try to seek understanding so that you can learn how to better how to better coexist, and then be able to introduce whatever line has to be introduced where we can coexist together and live together and work together for a common good. It's no way. I've been saying all along, and it's probably because I mean, 25 years is coming July, I'll be married, and I've come to understand, as much as I love my wife, I don't agree with her on everything that she does, and nor does she agree with everything that I do or say. I challenge anybody to tell me who they agree with 100% of the time on every issue, on every thought. You can't do it. So why do you expect that from others if you can't do it yourself? So, again, I appreciate what Michelle was saying. Now, I do believe God does raise up leaders for a particular time. I do believe that. But I believe that we have to make sure that we are following the leaders that God has put in place. And you have to pray to God and ask him, is this a godly person? Is this a person that's representing you well? And I think that's always been just what my issue has been all along with President Trump. And to be honest, he's made it very hard for me in the future. Now, I'm a Democrat, but I have voted Republican in the past, because of what I believed about that particular candidate at that time. But at the same time, I'll let you know, and I was thinking about this earlier, I don't think I could ever, if it ever comes about again, I don't know if I would ever be able to feel like I could trust a business person that has no background in politics, no background in serving. Okay. I don't know if I would ever be able to vote for somebody like that again, because honestly, I believe that most politicians, they get into politics at one point or a time because they really do care about their fellow man, that they do love their country. I think most of them do love their country when they first get in. Now, they may become corrupt while they're in the office. They may lose sight of what they're really there for. But I just find it, it would be very hard for me to see somebody who's like a millionaire, a billionaire, and say they want to be president. Because to me, what drives them is different. It's not about being a servant leader. It's just about being a leader and they have their own motives. They have their own things that they're aspiring to be, even beyond the office. So that's where I'm at. All right. So maybe I shouldn't let Michelle go so quick, but she says, I disagree. I think a lot of leaders explained it away or justified it and even said that he was sent from God. And you're right. There's a lot of people who believe that, and there are a lot of evangelicals who believe that, not that he was the savior, but God sent him for a particular reason, and I don't agree with that. Now, did he get some things accomplished, like Pastor said earlier about, electing judges, conservatives, things like that, putting some policies in place? Okay, yeah, it's not like he really wrote them, but he was there to make sure that those things happen. So I don't know. Pastor, kind of went off on a tangent there. Anything else before I let you go? Sorry, I see we're almost out of time.
No, thank you for letting me be on your show. Really appreciate it, and admire the work you're doing, and keep it up, Mark.
I appreciate you so much, sir. I mean, I know we just met a little more than an hour and a half ago, I guess. But I trust Mike. If Mike said you're good people, then I believe you're good people. If he says that we should be connected, then I believe we should be connected. So I truly appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. I know most pastors are extremely busy. You always got busy schedules. So I appreciate you spending this hour with us. Give us a little bit more insight.
We were connected long before we met tonight. So we're connected to the body of Christ. And
Absolutely. But I do hope that we'll be able to talk again sometime. But I believe that you did help us understand a little bit more, that fear factor that drives a lot of things. But the best thing I think we can do right now is pray for our country, pray for the incoming leadership, because they have a difficult task ahead of them of trying to unify this country that is so divided right now. And honestly, I don't believe it's going to happen in their term, whether it's one term or 2 terms. I think it's going to take many years. It's taken many years to get us to this point. I think it's going to take us well beyond 8 years to really heal. But I believe it just has to start someplace. And I think the church has to be a major part of that healing.
I agree.
All right. Well, it's about that time, y'all, for us to go. I appreciate you tuning in. As always, please take some time to share this particular broadcast. Let other people know. Get other people involved in the conversation. Follow the page. Again, Pastor, you do have, and I meant to pull it up so that people can see your Facebook page. But you do services online as well.
Yep.
Let me see if I can get to your page real quick.
10:30 every Sunday morning.
Okay. And I'm all for visiting other churches right now. I love doing that. It's nothing wrong with listening to other voices. As long as the initial voice is the voice of God, I think we're good. Let's see if I see it real good. I don't see your page. But I'll post it. I'll put a link into the comments so you guys can actually go to it. Again, thank you. Again, y'all know I love you. But as much as I love you, I could never love you as much as Christ and God. Hey, Mike, glad you checked in. I appreciate all that everybody does. And
what, Mike Dorsey checked in?
Yeah, Mike Dorsey. He's probably been here all along, just sitting in the little cut, as we say.
I can see his little picture down there.
Yeah.
Man, he's gotten better looking over the years.
Okay, well, that may be the first thing we disagree on. So
maybe I'm seeing someone else's picture.
Oh no, he's quite a handsome man. As I was saying, I love you, but know that as much as I love you, nobody loves you as much as God loves you. And if you don't know the love of God, if you don't know the love of Christ, I encourage you to get to know that above and beyond anything else. He proved his love by sending his son to die for your sins, to die for the things that you've done and will do. And all those things that are against his will would send you to hell. That's the penalty. He did all of that. He sent his son to pay for the penalty that you carry if you don't know Jesus Christ. And not only that, his son said, I'll go because I love them as well. But I also will get up in power. And he did just that. So he not only just came, he died, he rose again, also that you would not have to suffer the penalty of sin, which frankly is eternal separation from God the Father. If you want to know more about that, I'll be happy to talk to you about that. Hit me up here on Facebook. You can send me a messenger. You can send a comment, however you want to do it. I'll be happy to talk to you about what does it mean to be safe and be a kingdom child. Thank you again. I look forward to seeing everybody next Monday. I plan on having another great special guest. Just need to get one more confirmation. But until then, continue to be blessed. Continue to wear your mask. Continue to wash your hands. Continue to work in faith and not foolishness. And I will see you then. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you again, Pastor.